project management is such a critical thing, and it actually started in the construction industry. And you're shocked to hear that. I'll take you on before I tell you more about this course, I would like to take you on a brief history of project management. Project management started in the construction industry. It started in NASA. It was NASA that coined that word, project management, when they put man on the moon. Because of the complexity of getting so many skills together, remember that the mission was to put the man on the moon. That was mission critical. It needed people from different facets and areas of life coming together, working towards a goal. And they needed someone to coordinate all that input. And that was when they coined the role, project management. And actually, that was where the seeds of what we call PMI today was sown. PMI is a nonprofit that was actually a product of NASA sending man to the moon, which is why, forgive me to use the word Bible, which is why people call the PMBOK Guide the Bible of project management. It's because PMI that actually we create the PMBOK Guide, which is which advocates the ways of working within project management. I know there are different companies that have come up, and I'll explain to you how that has come up. But project management, because it started in construction sector, what we call today the traditional ways of working, which a lot of you here understand, is a waterfall way of working. It's because project management started in construction. That's why what we call, that's the way we work in construction. We finish one thing, we start another thing. That traditional way of working is a very construction way of executing things. And that's why the original PMBOK Guide was advocating that waterfall approach in doing things. Now, what happened was in the 1990s, during the dot-com bubble, the tech boys started saying this waterfall approach, while it was good, was not as efficient as they would like it to be. So they started to tinker in the way they approached work. They started coming up with new approaches. So things like Scrum, RAD, Extreme Programming, DSA/DM started coming into the market. It was their quest of the tech world to produce and complete projects quicker that drove them to these new approaches. But however, in the construction industry, we continued with our traditional way of working. But what we noticed was when these tech people started with these new approaches to delivering projects, their efficiency actually started to rise. Now, that trend continued till the 2000s when the agile methods of working now came into the market, again from the tech guys. The efficiency now, the delta between the tech industry and construction became too wide. Today, technology companies operate at 96% efficiency. Can anyone tell me? No, not the people that were here yesterday. Can anyone that was not here yesterday tell me what they think the productivity within construction is? Any guesses? Sir? 52%? Any guess? Closer to that. We're only at 21%. Yes. The only sector construction is better than is agriculture. Construction is the second most inefficient sector in the world. And a lot of people actually don't realize that. Construction industry, we didn't understand what was happening almost till a year passed. And by the time we realized what was happening, half of the workforce had gone on holiday. Right? Now, but what really happened was a lot of people in the industry also started saying to PMI, the PMP, while it's a wonderful certification, the PMBOK Guide 7 had more of agile concept, was now leaning more towards the digital sector. And we also wanted to understand this delta in efficiency between the tech industry and the construction industry. How do we solve for this? How do we try to improve the efficiencies within construction industry? So this thinking was behind PMI going into the journey of creating this new certification. A lot of you know that the PMP had PMP construction extension. However, this is the first time PMI has gone into creating a sector-focused certification for project managers because they wanted to understand why this inefficiency and how do we solve for it. So some of the research we did actually showed us some really shocking things. While construction is the biggest sector in the world, it accounts for 13% of global GDP, it's only grown by 1% in the last 20 years. Any sector that had grown by that amount would have been dead by today. But because we are being propped up by governments, by all sorts of gimmick, we've tinkered on. But it shows a sector that is really in need for change. Now, we also saw that the amount of money needed to deal with infrastructure deficit in the world today was $69.4 trillion by 2035. I was actually corrected in Saudi Arabia that only Saudi, one of their ministries, was going to spend $360 trillion in 5 years. So what this says is that no African government has this kind of money. It means that we need to be more efficient in the way we utilize resources in the sector. So we need to utilize every investment being made in the sector, we need to utilize it properly. That's what that is telling us. We all know what's happening globally today. A lot of governments are going through hard times. They don't have the kind of money they used to throw at everything. So, but even worse, I would say that Kenya is an anomaly because this is the first time I'm walking into a construction conference and I see women, young people. Normally I see old guys and I'm the youngest one in the room. And I'm telling them, this is about to happen to your sector. And they all look at me with the frown faces like, are you, really? Yes. So, but this is not a joke. 41% of the US workforce within the construction industry is expected to retire by 2031. In most parts of the world, this statistic is consistent. So it shows a sector that is finding it very difficult to attract talent, that is struggling. Today, in the West, it's easier for you to find a civil engineer in a startup than in a construction company. Why? Because we're not cool. The kind of things we're talking about are things that we use for 20 years and we turn up and tell them, I've done it this way for 50 years. Those guys don't want to hear that. They want a different world. They have a different mindset, especially the Gen Zs. So PMI, when we saw things like this, we said, okay, this sector needs more. We needed to do more research to understand a bit more on the granularity of what's actually happening there. So we interviewed 40,000 PMPs working in the construction industry. And what we saw was even more shocking. Globally, on the average, 7 out of 10 projects in construction end up over budget. 73%. That's 7 out of 10. Again, 72% experience project delays. That's again another 7 out of 10. Just think about it. 7 out of 10 projects. And again, the same ratio, 7 out of 10 experience scope creep. Some people will argue that in Africa and some other parts of the world where we're a bit more relaxed with the way we do things, that number is more like 90, 9 out of 10. But the one that really is shocking is that for every $1 billion spent in construction, 127 million is wasted. That's 13%. Again, they corrected me in Saudi and said it's more of 30% in Saudi. In Africa, I've been told it's more of 50%. Can you imagine the amount of waste? I'm saying if I put $1 billion on a project, 500 million has gone to. No, let's not call it the names, huh? I come from a nation that knows how to, and that my country is more of 80% goes to waste. Right? But what this is showing us is that we can't continue like this. You know, it's all well and good, all of us talking about metaverse, but you actually need a physical infrastructure to enable the metaverse to happen. And of all the leaps that we're seeing in Africa and the continent, we still need that basic infrastructure to pull people out of poverty, to create a real middle class income. So it was scary numbers like this that made PMI say, okay, the project triangle, the typical triangle that someone mentioned there, cost, time, and quality, have been discussed for a very long time. There have been books that have been written about these concepts. What we are going to do is that we're going to take a different approach. We're not going to try and do the same thing that have been done in the industry before. And one of the other issues we found in the industry is that because of how wonderful and vast the industry is, a lot of the thinking in the industry is very siloed. So one quantity surveyors in one place, they have their own certification. We have architects, they have their own certification. We have civil engineers, they have their own certification. We have mechanical engineers. Nobody is speaking to each other. And then, what we're actually certifying is our technical skills. And we are magically supposed to run everybody and coordinate everybody together. So that siloed thinking is what stresses on cost, time, and quality. Because those are the three places they actually focus when they're testing us in those areas. So we said, if you look at the tech world today, if any of you have worked in the tech industry, you will understand what I'm saying. A programmer might not be a project manager, but he understands what Scrum means. He understands what the sprint we're running this week means. Try to go to a foreman and ask him anything that's not block, brick, where to play. But that's not the way the industry. So to what David said, we needed a total mindset shift. We should not just focus on cost, time, and quality. How do we take those three and look at it from a holistic view of a project? How do we look at the end-to-end execution of a project? Because that's the job of a project manager. The job of a project manager is to ensure that ideas are being converted into reality. So it's taking it from ideation through execution to completion. And yes, cost, time, and quality are important, but as well is leadership, is communication, is negotiation, and so many other things. So what we decided to do was now to invite different organizations in the industry to ask them what actually are the issues they're seeing. Because we didn't want to create a certification that was just speaking to what we thought in our heads. And what these guys confirmed was, while cost, quality, and time was important, they actually saw bigger issues in the industry. They saw 7 main areas of issues. Number 1 is communication, ineffective communication, right? It's a big, major problem in the industry. Number 2 is that change order has become something we use every time. You know, you come into rooms, people use change order. Change order is a function of not thinking things through. That's what it is. In tech, when you actually request for a change order, they make you understand this is what you're trying to do. Whereas in construction, we come in at the low cost because we know we have change order management. Contractors, we have to exchange other. They increase the cost because that's where they make their money. Right? Thirdly, is that the complex nature of projects we're doing today, guys, you're having a machine more powerful than what sent the man to the moon in your pocket. The complexity of projects we're doing today in construction is so complex that we now need skills from different backgrounds to execute within the construction industry. Think of something like the Burj Khalifa. Think of even the roads here. I've seen, the way you're now constructing roads here. We are now being challenged to have things that are green, more sustainable. These are languages we didn't understand in the industry before. So how do we make sure that all these are being embedded in the projects that we're doing? Because more and more, unfortunately for us, the finance boys are saying we're not going to fund bad behavior anymore. Gone are the days when you turn up and tell me you want to build this, we just fund it. No, we want to see it sustainable. We want to see it actually more impactful. So these are not things that a typical project manager within construction is used to. Another thing they talked about was poor design, which leads to poor execution. A lot of people mentioned it earlier. We do not take the time to actually plan and design projects properly. It's the can-do mentality, which is good, but also has resulted in a lot of trouble because you then start projects without actually thinking it through. Another issue they found out was, even sometimes when we have a project manager in projects, we measure the wrong metrics, which enforces the wrong behavior in projects because we want to look good. So those are the type of things that we're seeing as issues. Let me just add one other thing that I'll just move to the last one because that one is one that comes very close to heart, is that construction is one sector that has refused technology. We have refused technology and innovation. Okay, so before I joined PMI, what I was doing in the UK was I was involved in smart infrastructure. And it was interesting when you walk up to an engineer and say, dude, can we make this road smart? So because, we talk about driverless cars today. One of the issues you have with a driverless car being on the street is what we call the V2X, which is the infrastructure. If the infrastructure is not smart, the car could be smart, but it wouldn't. I'll give you a very good example. If it needs to turn and a person is standing there, how does it know? It will kill the person that moves on. So you need a smart infrastructure. And to create a smart infrastructure, sometimes it's very simple things like putting an IoT devices on the road, which was one of those startups I was working with. The cat's eyes that you have on roads. Instead of it being a dumb device, they converted it to an IoT device that scans the whole road. So it communicates through the whole road, and the car can actually see where it is going without any human being on. So it can detect there's something here. Now, you walk up to Amy and tell Amy, this is a new kit. Can we get it on a M25 road? The guy will ask you, have you tested it for 30 years? And you're looking at the guy thinking, 30 years? You mean, I was trying to explain to them, but in 30 years, we might be in flying cars, no more. At the pace we're going in Silicon Valley, dude, you need to start. But what I realized while I was doing this role was not that the guys were dumb. It's just that they did not understand technology. There's a famous rapper that said, people fear what they don't understand. I hate what they can't conquer. So they don't understand it, so they just fear it and say, sorry, I'm not going to put this thing in the road, and the way I defend myself is to ask you, have you tested it for 30 years? Because that protects me, and I'll have you not do that. So these are the main things the industry told us, PMI, that were issues they were facing. And we decided to do the research to actually understand, how do you change that mindset? Coming back to what David said. Because when you look at this, it doesn't say cost. It doesn't say quality. It doesn't say time. It's talking about real practical stuff that you face in projects. So the challenge was for PMI, how do you still maintain projects or deliver projects while taking into consideration all these things. So even though we have 50 years experience in project management, even though we are the arbiter in project management globally, we understood that there were specific nuance. There were specific ideas that have come into the industry that we needed to work with. So the Lean Construction Institute are the people at the forefront of lean ways of working in construction. And all it is saying is, how do you make things as efficient and as lean as possible? It's a concept they use in tech. So we partnered with LCI, the Lean Construction Institute, and CII, which is the Construction Industry Institute. The Construction Industry Institute are the forefront of agile ways of working in construction. Some people will say to me, what do you mean? Agile in construction? Yes. When you think of what people call agile way of working, I call it a data-driven way. Because what we're doing in tech is that you build a prototype. I go to my clients, I ask questions, I take data, it informs my next decision, I make changes, I come back to you, I take more data, I go back, I make more decisions. I could do that in construction. I could front load a lot of my construction work and do a lot of the planning using what we call now digital twin to ask questions. Is this what you want? Before I go to execution. Abraham Lincoln said, if you have 10 hours to do something, use 8 hours to get ready for it, right? Why is it that we don't plan properly in construction? So CII Department of Energy, Petronas, Jacobs, L&T, BHP, Amy. Basically, we brought construction organizations from different parts of the world to support in the development of this course because we wanted to make sure it was something that was relevant to the industry and we were getting real-time feedback on what has been developed. Does it speak to the issues you're having and will it solve the problems you're facing today? So that's how this new certification was created. It is for the industry, by the industry, to transform the way we do things in the industry, to change the mindset of the industry. So those were the main things that we did as part of this course. But what we wanted this course to deliver was 4 main things. We wanted to improve efficiency. We want to actually start, let me put it into context to you guys, because this research was in Middle East that we did it. We're at 21% efficiency in construction industry. If we eke it up to 5%, just 5% in the Middle East, that is $80 billion to the Middle Eastern economy. I'm not saying that we should become as efficient as the tech guys. I'm just saying 5% increment in efficiency would drive $80 billion in the economy. So when we think of what we're saying here, we're just saying, let's have incremental changes and improvements within the industry to improve efficiency in the way we do projects. Secondly, is that we want to deliver effective projects. More and more and more, we are required for our projects to actually have more purpose. Understanding the purpose of a project and making sure we bring it to life is what we want this new certification to do, because a lot of the times we get on a project, it's not actually what we think is the purpose of the project, but if you use some of the techniques we've actually shown you, like active listening, you understand what the real purpose of the project is and be able to actually deliver effective projects within the construction industry. Another thing we want to do with this course is to drive impact. We want more younger people. We want more ladies to get involved in the industry, to impact our community in a positive way, to professionalize the profession even more, to have more people, tech has revolutionized the world. The increment in wages in that sector, we can actually achieve it in the construction industry if we start to become better in the way we handle projects. And lastly, we would like to embed sustainability in what we're doing within the construction industry. Construction industry is the biggest polluter in the world. It is the biggest polluter in the world by a mile. How do we start to solve those problems? These are the thinkings that we had when we developed and what we would like this new certification to achieve. So, a lot of people, before I go into the specifics of the certification, people will ask me, so how does this differ from the PMP? I like to tell people, while the PMP is a wonderful certification that gives you a very good grounding in project management, some from the construction industry will argue that it doesn't tell you some of the nuance on how to handle certain things in a construction scenario. And I like to give a very basic example. If we talk of waste in tech, you can fit it in this laptop, a terabyte in this laptop. If you talk of waste in construction, a ton of waste. So, and how do you deal with that waste? How do you recycle that waste? In it's a totally different world. Your considerations there are so different. So that's the reason why, while the PMP is a good and broad project management certification, we believe that if you want to specialize in managing projects within the construction industry, this is the certification for you. However, for the certification to make sense for people taking it, you need at least 3 years experience. Because some of the concepts we're talking about, if you've not been in the industry, you wouldn't understand what we're talking about. It's not a theoretical course. It's a very practical course, because our expectation is that you'll apply your learning in real life environment immediately. But secondly, we've used a lot of scenario planning or scenarios in trying to communicate the essence and the ideas being introduced as part of this course. So, I'll go straight to this one. The course has 7 main parts. It's 7 courses. Of these 7 courses, 3 of them have macro credentials. What it means is that 4 of them, you don't need to take exams. 3 of them, you have to take exams after taking them. Then before you're allowed to take the actual certification exam. But before you take the certification exam, you would have taken all 7, passed the 3 macro credentials, prove that you have 3 years experience in the industry, and then you're allowed to take the certification exam. And I will say, because some people that have started taking the course here, some are smiling, it is as thorough as the PMP, if not more thorough. Because we don't want it to be a very light certification that anyone can just take. We're taking what is happening in the industry very seriously. So first is what we call the built environment. One of the first course is the Built Environment Project Communication Pro. We'll talk about how do you actually communicate in a project. One of the big concepts we'll talk about here is the Obeya concept, the big room, right? In tech, I'll always go back to tech, right? Just to show the similarities. In tech, we have Kanban, we have sprints. Everybody knows, everybody from the designer to the coder to the tester, everybody's seen what is being designed and can tell you at real time, does this idea, is it going to make sense? Can you code it and can you test it? This is what it looks like. In construction, you all have said it. Even companies that have a turnkey solution, the architectural companies in Switzerland, the implementation team will hire anybody that, will be based here in Kenya, might hire people that have never been to Kenya before, to come and join the project. Then the operation and management team will not be hired till it has been completed, and we've seen cracks, and then we remember they have to, you have to manage it. What we see in the industry is that we have big holes, because when the architect is designing and the guy that is going to implement it does not have any input or understand what the architect is designing, to actually challenge to say, actually what you're designing, while it's wonderful, you can't build this. It's not possible, right? And the operator will tell you, this asset, you can't, it will have this issue, it will have that issue. We see it every day in construction, because 9 out of every 10 times, what is designed by the architect is not what is built. We take it as, that's the way the industry is, but that's not the right thing. If you had a project manager that had a clear communication strategy, that had an obeyer way of working, the big room way of working, what we're advocating is at the design stage, at the early stage, why not have this project manager, at least one of the technical people from the other work streams, participate at the early stages and front load a lot of the planning. Going back to the point I made earlier, let's plan properly. Let's be very clear in what we're trying to execute. Then the execution becomes even quicker and shorter. But because we're trying to save money, we don't want to pay consultants to come in early. We end up spending more money. Because that's why you build something, knock it down because it doesn't fit well, it doesn't do but if the front-loading planning was done properly and there was clarity on what we're about to go out to do, because this is the way we have now learned to do things, projects will actually execute better. So here we talk about the obeyer concept, and what I've just explained is a lean way of working. So we'll talk about this lean way of working, the computer systems that can actually help you set up this obeyer concept. And we'll also talk about the compass tool, which actually helps you measure the effectiveness of your communication in a project. One of the things we're trying to make us do with this new certification is to let us start using fact and not goth. Because at the moment, what we do is that, I think is this. We use a lot of estimation, right? Construction has been going on forever. There was a point that was made earlier. Why can't we not? I was reading an article and they said, today, Silicon Valley can actually automate 40% of construction work. Why are we not there? 40% of what we do in construction can be automated. But it's not automated because we don't use data, right? We just use estimations and, this is what I feel. So what we're saying is, let's change the way we think in the industry. It's a mindset shift to say, let's communicate with our stakeholders. Even when we have challenges from the clients, how do we communicate in a compelling way? This is the issue in this environment. This is the way we're going to solve it. And these are the systems that will actually help you solve it. It's that compelling communication way that we're trying to teach as part of this particular course, as well as the other areas that I touched upon. Secondly is the scope and change order management. We heard earlier when they talked about scope change being a culture in the industry. But how do you actually articulate scope change properly using a tool that communicates to everybody, this is the impact, this is what it will do, and this is actually how to get through it. And the right systems that help you do that, right? And actually, how do you use, today, project managers are expected to actually connect more to the strategic objective of the client. We actually advocate for project managers to start looking at the project from an end-to-end point of view and understand the work packages and scope of work in construction. We have a unique, what the different teams are supposed to be doing to make sure that there is no overlap or missing of any scope. Because that's something we see in the industry every day. We say, well, I thought this team was supposed to do it and that team was supposed to, you end up with that mess. And sometimes we don't know who was supposed to do it. It was not, but we want to give the project manager the responsibility to actually start looking at the project from an end-to-end point of view, be able to structure a project delivery in a very effective way that makes it easier to execute and within time and budget. Now, and the systems, the computer systems that will actually help you do that interface management and measure how each interface team is doing. Then the next one is the built environment, performance and material pro. We talk about the KPIs you use in a project. How do you test it to make sure that KPI is relevant? It's driving the right behavior. Just don't use things because this is the way we've always done it. Do you question your KPIs? Do you create new KPIs that drive the type of behavior that you want in a project? Secondly, we'll talk about the kind of materials that you use in a project. How future-proof are you with your project? Are you building projects for just today? What if the regulation changes? How easily do you bring it into your project? Because the world that we live in today, the assets we're building today are almost like things that are going to live longer than most of us. Are we taking that into consideration when we're building projects? What type of material choices are they sustainable? Are there things that will keep the environment safe? So these are the type of things and the type of ways to approach a project that we're bringing to bear, and how concepts that you can actually use to bring all those ideas into your project. Then we talk about execution planning and built environment projects. That's another course. This course, so a lot of the guys in construction here use critical path because that's the standard we use in the industry. But critical path, while it's a wonderful approach, has its own limitations, especially when we're talking about a sustainable world. So why not use advanced work packaging? How do you easily look at a project that you're running behind, and how do you reforecast and bring in other tools that will actually help you to execute on time and budget? So advanced work packaging has been shown to be more effective than critical path in varied scenarios, especially where you have complex projects that have different. So those are the type of things that we're talking about in this particular course. We're talking about the LPS approach, the CCSU, and which scenario is the best place to use each approach and each method. Then we'll talk about the contract and risk management. How do you use your contract to enforce the right approach in the project? You know, in construction, I've said it before, we're used to people lowballing. They come in with a cheap cost just to win the project, and then everything will go up. But I can tell you that if you have the right contracting strategy, in UK, there have been cases where major construction companies had to pay huge fine because they didn't know that because normally when they come to government, they bamboozle you, you know, we say in consulting, if you can't convince them, confuse them. So they come, the client signs off, but unfortunately for them in this particular strategy, the client had hired project managers to advise them. So they were acting on their behalf. There are clauses there, you know, some poison clauses that were there. So when the contract was halfway, the construction company, the contractor went back to say, no, we have to increase. Council said no. The litigation was messy. The fine was huge. But how do we start to do that in Africa? Because we all complain, oh, they didn't build this thing properly. I always say it's not corruption that is the issue. No. I've seen more corrupt nations. What is the issue is that we don't understand what we've been told that will be executed, and we didn't create a means to hold the person accountable to what they've said they will create. I don't know if it's making sense. Companies turn up and tell us we're going to do this for you. They bamboozle you, you accept whatever, that's fine, but you sign off on things you don't understand. And when the company builds a lot of the white elephants that I've seen in a lot of African cities that cannot be operated, then we turn around and look at ourselves. But because we didn't get the contracts right, of course there's no recourse. So, but how do we get our contracts right and make sure that whatever we're doing within the industry actually starts to work for both sides, both the contractor and for the client? And you know, on the contractor side, how do you use the contract to manage the client? All this running away and not paying their bills, which has led to a lot of bankruptcy in the industry, which is why we cut a lot of corners. How do we use contracts to actually enforce that? Last but not the least is the Technology and Innovation Pro. We'll talk about the BIM way, the BIM concept. What I like to laugh about is that BIM is a new word we throw around in the industry. BIM was actually invented in the 1970s. Yes, but we've refused to use it till recently, right? 1970s technology we're getting really excited about. But what we're now trying to talk about is data analytics and the digital twin, because that's where the real magic happens. How do you create a smart asset that, picking the data from all the sensors you've thrown in that asset, you can actually replicate that asset as a digital twin? What this means is that as we operate that asset and make changes, we have a digital replica of that asset that can actually enable us to make changes and execute it even better. So it's concept, and we also try to enforce the use of more technology within the industry. We try to explain what some of these technologies, things like blockchain, most construction guys don't understand what all these things mean. So we try to explain what all these technologies are so that it will be easier for people to actually start applying some of these technologies in projects they're doing today. And also enforce an innovative culture within the organization. So these are the 7 parts of this course. And in our opinion, why does it matter? Today in the United Kingdom, if you want to work in the construction industry, they actually don't look at you with your Prince 2. They want you to have an APM, because that's actually more akin to the construction industry. However, what APM doesn't have is the global reach PMI has and the extensive research capability. And they've not taken this approach that we've taken, this lean, data-driven, and system elements that we've taken. That's one of the differences that we see between the way this course works and what they've developed. So what we are looking for, because we're already working with organizations, with the industry, we're actively forming what we're calling the industry forum. And it's something we have done before as PMI. Today in PMI, Jean can confirm to this, in our global summit, we have our council. You have Amazon, Tech Mahindra, Microsoft. These are competitors sitting down in the same room to talk about project management. What did you do? How did it work for you? So we know that industries like to share knowledge, because that's how advancement of humanity happens. And we want to create the same thing within the construction industry. And that way, develop a global standard. Because I can assure you today, the QS guy calls something one name, the electrical engineer calls it another name, the same thing. But how do we unify? How do we have a global standard? Because that's actually when we start to progress things forward. So one of the things we want to achieve with this course is that it sets a global standard in the construction industry, especially within project management in construction. Secondly, a lot of people mentioned it here before. While we have been trained in our technical skills, we were not trained as project managers. So this is an affirmation of your project management skill within the construction industry. And that's what we hope that people that will take this course will achieve. Thirdly, is that when you use a lean and data-driven approach, the concept I've just told you becomes cheaper, projects get delivered on time, and if you follow the method I've told you, it will be the right quality. So I've solved for the 3 things you've been doing in silos by just doing the entirety of things in a more structured way. You see where I'm coming from now? So what we see is that this certification will help organizations to deliver their projects in a more profitable, efficient, and sustainable way. And last but not the least is that for organizations, be it professional bodies, whatever, it becomes a way for them to actually show their members that they want them to have the cutting-edge skills available in the market. We are confident that more organizations globally, because when we speak to the Bechtels, the Burns of McDonald's, the industry movers, what they say is that what they see today in the industry is that construction will go through what happened in the digital world in the 2000s. The way we are going to work in the next 5 years is going to fundamentally change, at least in the developed world. And we Africans have an opportunity to learn the good behavior early doors. Kenya has proven that we can do it. M-Pesa is a big hit. So mobile payments, a lot of the things that we see today is thanks to M-Pesa. Right? The fintech market that we see grown today was thanks to M-Pesa. We showed that you can actually do this and make it happen at scale. So why can't we be part of this new revolution? I'm preaching something I know confidently that in the West they're taking very serious. Because they don't have the money to throw at things like they used to in the past. So they have to change the way they execute projects. So why don't we upskill ourselves to the same level as them? And that's the reason why, whenever I meet people like Jane, who is very, and I'm not saying that I'm not being equivocal, who's very passionate about the continent, I say to her, let's go fight this together. Because I can go into the room and say, yes, we might be a small continent compared to, purchasing power of parity. Yes, we might be at our development stage, but the way we actually have reaped the success of the leapfrogging in the banking sector and other sector, we can actually reap the same, benefits from being trained in this particular way. So, please, all I will say is that I'm happy that the NCA is already thinking about how to change things in the industry. Actually, an African government has just adopted this as the standards for training their project managers. And that will be going to press next week. So I always urge other industry captains to say, how do we work with you? How do we support you to bring the right standards, to grow your local market and professionalize your local market? Because that's how we get a knowledge economy.